of years. It is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Huron-Wendat and Neutral peoples. Today, it is home to the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation, the Six Nations of the Grand River, and to many other Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that this land is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant. This treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee binds them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, settlers, and all newcomers have been invited to this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. We all share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty, meaning we must take care of the land and the creatures we share with it. We are guided by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's final report, recognizing the urgent importance of the Commission's 94 calls to action in guiding the healing and reconciliation process. We seek a new relationship with the original peoples of this land, one based in honor and deep respect. May we be guided by love and right action as we transform our personal and institutional relationships with our Indigenous friends and neighbors. And for the first time since the pandemic began, we are meeting in person here in Hamilton, in the Hamilton study area. My name is Jackson Hudecki. I'm the Bird Study Group Director. Welcome everybody to the First Unitarian Church, which you're likely hearing me back there on Zoom because we're trying something new tonight, and you're all witnessing me in a sweaty panic trying to figure out a whole bunch of stuff here. So we reached an agreement with the church here to host these meetings, and they weren't able to provide us with an AV person tonight. So we just happened to find this podium, and we brought all of our own stuff. They basically unlocked the doors and let us do this, and we've had to figure it all out ourselves. But this is the last time this pandemonium is going to occur, because next month and in May, we'll have an AV tech and things should go smoothly. So you might witness some hiccups tonight. So be patient with Kelly Sue and I as we figure some things out. And thank you to Sheila for getting us in the building tonight. Is this anyone's first bird study group meeting by chance? All right, welcome. So the Naturalist Club runs 2 meetings a month. One is a general meeting with a variety of different topics, but because birds have been so prevalent in the Hamilton region, and because there are so many darn birders around here, they've got this wing called the Bird Study Group, and that's the second meeting that's hosted in a month. And how this typically works is there's some club announcements shared by me before we introduce our special guest. And then we take a Q&A at the very end. So I'm going to go through some slides here before passing it off. And if at any time you have any questions, just raise your hand. But the goal is to kind of just continue our conversations about birds in a group setting, not outside, not looking at birds, because there are a multitude of people in the community who know so much about the topic of birding that we want to provide a platform to experts and beginners all the same. And we welcome everybody into the world of nature, which is kind of the reason why a lot of meetings start with land acknowledgements, because we want people to feel safe anywhere they go, and that includes especially on the trails. Tonight's topic is all about mindfulness, and so you might start seeing or hearing some of these topics a bit more as time marches forward. So topics like slow birding, there's an institution called the Mindful Birding Network, a topic of birdability, and of course using the code of birding ethics in order to, just keep the safety and well-being of nature and the environment and one another in mind. But that includes ensuring that everybody is able to or provided the opportunity to engage with nature or the outdoors, or in this case, birds in some manner. I'm assuming Kelly Sue might talk about a couple of these things tonight, maybe. I'm getting a nod, that's great. And speaking of which, the OFO, Birds Canada, and TOC, the Toronto Ornithological Club, have started an endeavor to help make birding for everybody. And they're looking for some volunteers to kind of help out with these efforts. I'm going to show you a map here in a second, but trying to identify some of the most accessible birding locations in Southern Ontario. And in this case, it's kind of the Golden Horseshoe. So they've chosen 12 birding sites. And they're looking for volunteer teams. Each team will have at least 2 nature lovers, including at least one who has experienced barriers while trying to access nature. Trained team to use the 3 apps on the trails and assess 12 locations in the spring and summer of 2023. And these are those locations, which you can see that the Dundas Valley and Dundas Marsh are on there. But with Bob Bell presenting in January and his plight with Lyme disease, it really did bring up the topic of, like, you know, how accessible is the Hamilton area for birders and for birding? What are the spots that can easily be accessed by bus, or a location where birds are that you don't have to travel too far up or down hills on a paved path? So this endeavor by OFO is to try and recognize that across Ontario, which is pretty cool. And so there's a variety of ways to get involved. So if this is something that you'd be interested in, I'm sure you can check out more on the OFO website. And speaking of websites, the Naturalist Club is happy to announce that we've just recently relaunched our brand new website. So this has been a few years in the making, where we've heard from folks, your website sucks. And so we had to do our best to find someone out there who was able to help us with this, and they have, and now it's launched. But one thing that, if you're a member of the Naturalist Club, is that you have a special login area that will allow you some member privileges. And we're kind of trying to grow what those member privileges are. So in the top right corner of the website, there'll be a login. And to be honest, I don't know how to log in. I just clicked forgot my password. It sent me a new password, and then I was able to create a new one and log in, because I don't know where they would have sent your login for that necessarily. It could be a member number. I'm not too sure. But if you just click forget password, it'll email it to your email address, and then you're good to go from there. So that's an interesting update for you all. Be sure to check out hamiltonnature.org. We've got a special fundraiser occurring for the Hamilton Naturalist Club this year, which, if you were at last week's meeting, you would have heard Bill chatting about Marcus Legsden's HSA big year. So Marcus is in the room tonight. And so, yeah, round of applause for Marcus. A pre-round of applause, of course, because there you go. You're at 111 species so far. Anyone above that in the room this year yet? Just sussing out the competition for you, so that's good. So your goal is to see 275. So is 274 the record? Is that Dobus's record, or are you just giving yourself a challenge? What's 275 all about? This is my first goal. 280 is the record by Rob Dobus, I'm pretty sure. 275 is your personal best. So 281 is the secret goal, but 275 is the on paper goal. So you're able to make a pledge for Marcus's fundraiser. And again, all the proceeds will go to the Naturalist Club. So you can access this from the hamiltonnature.org website if you want to make a pledge. So that's great. And Marcus is here if you have any questions for him specifically. You can check in with him at the end. Yeah. Thank you. You get a charitable donation upon your donation. Thank you, Bill. And so Marcus's name is actually in the bottom left corner here of the Bob Curry Trophy. So if you're a young birder, or you know a young birder who meets the criteria that you see on the screen there, they're eligible to apply for the Robert Curry Trophy, which that's where we see 253 is what you saw last year. So you're looking to highly surpass last year's record for yourself. So definitely keep that in mind, and we'll be presenting that in May, as well as the Bird of the Year for 2022. All right, so last month I got stuck in that crazy snowstorm and wasn't able to actually host personally the February bird study group meeting, where my title was February because I was convinced that we haven't seen a ton of interesting, or let's say rare or unusual birds this winter, but things are starting to heat up. Today and yesterday, so I guess yesterday and this morning, a greater white-fronted goose was seen in Hamilton, but 50 plus were seen in the Haldimand area, not too far from here. But spring is in the air. Bob Bell provided this photo of an eastern meadowlark, tons of red-winged blackbirds and other blackbird species. Someone was seeing tree swallow recently, and things things. Birds are mating. We know that that redneck grebe and certain birds are starting to get into some mating displays with one another. And I can share that there are bald eagles on the nest on Coots Paradise currently. And so we suspect that they'll be hatching at some point in late March, which is cool, but don't know how many are on the nest, obviously, because it's quite far away. But the other big news is that the peregrine falcons on the Sheridan have laid an egg today. So things are happening in the nature world, which is great. So if you're in the chat, let us know if there's any interesting birds you've seen lately, but this is kind of a list of February and March's unusual birds, and it's not an exhaustive list. I'm sure there are more, but lots of sandhill cranes are on the move. And the great cormorant has lasted through the winter, as well as the yellow-rumped warbler, so that's pretty interesting. So some really cool birds, but like turkey vultures are being seen plentifully. In fact, 366 have been seen at the Beamer Conservation Area already since March. So March 1st begins the Hawk Watch at Beamer. So as of the 18th, that's all what's been seen so far. And so we got a good amount of turkey vultures, a handful of bald eagles, quite a few red-tailed hawks, peregrine, some unknowns scooching through. So if you're in the Grimsby area, be sure to go check out the Hawkwatch Tower. And there is a way to continue to volunteer with that. So you can check out the Niagara Peninsula Hawkwatch website for more. I'm going to kind of blitz through some of these just for the sake of time. There are plenty of events that you can take part in should you want to get yourself involved. So there's a visit to the Cartwright Nature Sanctuary. That's this Saturday from 10 until 12. So Jen Baker will take people on a stroll through Cartwright. There is an evening outing to see woodcocks with Sheldon McGregor. Is Sheldon here right now? So Sheldon is able to take information or take questions, but he's leaving the location a secret for now. And if anyone is carpooling, the hope is that everyone gathers at Dundurn Castle and then he takes you to the location from there. He's not advertising it, and that's on April the 4th. Chris Motherwell continues with the WELO count through the IBA. So that is April 8th from 9 until 12. If you're able to volunteer, that's great. And those are all the IBAs across North America, and there's a whole smattering in our neck of the woods. So there is something that we're going to need your help on a little bit, and that is helping us decide the next 100 to 200 years of our nature sanctuaries, which is a bit of a daunting task, which is why we need a few brains involved with this. So Jen is putting together a forum on April 15th, where it's just a means of getting everyone together to talk a little bit about what would be some of our best practices in managing our multitude of nature sanctuaries. They're going to change, they're going to look different. And how can the HNC right now start planning a succession plan for the future? So if you would like to add your history of what you've known some of these sanctuaries to be, and your knowledge of your understanding of how nature transforms, reach out to Jen and get yourself involved with this. It's for a few hours on that Saturday morning, and the location is yet to be determined, but Jen will tell you when you register for it. And if you do have a lot of just general trivia knowledge, we are reviving trivia for nature. These aren't nature-related trivia questions, which I thought they were the first couple of times I went, and I'm terrible at trivia, so I took advantage of the bar and just hung out instead. So if you would like to get involved with that, tickets are $15 or $100 for a team of 8. There will be prizes. Once again, I'm pretty sure hosted by Warren Beecham. So that'll be happening again at the St. Paul's United Church in Dundas. We'd love for you to be a member of the Naturalist Club. We'd love to have you. And there's a whole bunch of ways to get involved with birding in the Hamilton study area, and especially on social media. And Lou here and I are always willing to talk about other future presenters. If you know somebody, if you have an event, you want something highlighted, let us know, and we'll be happy to mention it at these meetings. As I wind down here, the next general meeting, the next public meeting is on April 10th. And so Maggie Sims will be our special guest presenting about polar bears, wolves, birds, and rhinos. So to learn more about that, you can attend on Zoom or meet right back here. It'll start at 7:30 on April 10th. And then just announced Brett Forsyth will be our speaker for April, presenting on the human-powered big year. So he saw many species by bike alone. And so it's going to be an interesting talk. I don't know if he's going to cycle here for this April meeting, but that's April 17th. I've got 7 p.m. up here because 7 is a mingle time, and we're still going to be figuring out what that looks like. Tonight, again, you saw us running around like crazy. And so that's going to be that night. Okay. Any questions, any comments before I introduce our special guest? I'm very excited that you're all here tonight for this. So Kelly Sue is our special guest, and she's arrived here from Blenheim, Ontario. Kelly Sue found birding as a way to practice self-care, grounding, meditation, and mindfulness. Diagnosed with an autoimmune C-PTSD, ADHD, and other health issues experienced by many, she was inspired to share her love of birding and its healing benefits with others. This presentation will include an overview of the project, a short documentary, one of the Birder Brain episodes, and some of Kelly Sue's favorite mindful birding experiences and tips on how to use birding to improve your own mental and physical health. So with that said, we're going to troubleshoot through some computer stuff here, but let's put our hands together for Kelly Sue.
That was the short list of things that are wrong with me. It's recommended I shorten it a bit.
So let's get your presentations.
So we're going to be using 2 computers, so this should be interesting.
Okay, good to know. Okay.
Share screen. Yeah, I'm sure.
And so the speaker is coming out of the front of this, not anywhere in the room, just so you're aware.
And I guess we didn't know how to get rid of the bottom. Okay,
Is that okay?
that's fine, yeah.
You can put the 3 dots. And hide floating meeting controls.
Not reading it, I'll keep going now.
Meeting controls, there you go.
Up, down, over, there we go. This is my first presentation in person since COVID, so having to figure out how to do this is a whole different situation. Okay, I think we're ready. And I did have an idea as Jackson. Thank you for inviting me, by the way, Jackson. I really appreciate it. Last year at this time, I would have lived 5 minutes down the road. Now I'm 2 hours away, so great timing. But Jackson, honestly, like when I moved to Hamilton, the short period of time that I was here was like just really one of the most kind people that I met, who was so open and welcoming and willing to share information, which is really appreciated because I've moved over 35 times in my life and have to keep restarting my birding areas. So it was great to have someone that knew the area really well. And before I start, quick tip, if you also want to see 275 birds this year in the HSA, there are these things you can buy that you can like attach to like the bottom of someone's car, and you could just follow Marcus around. You'll see the same birds. I've thought about doing it a few times myself. He seems to find a lot of good stuff. If not, well, you might not see that many, I don't know. Anyways, my name is Kelly Sue, and I'm going to talk to you about a project that I started about a year ago, not quite a year ago, actually, called Birder Brain. Before we get started, and I really introduce myself, I just wanted to see if anybody, oh, no, see, this is going to start on its own. That's not what I want. Pause. Okay. Did anybody have a stressful day today? Did anyone have a stressful week? Did anyone have a stressful month? Has anyone had a stressful year? Has anyone had a stressful life? Good, we're all on the same page. I just wanted to start the presentation with a little mindful minute. I will talk about more about mindfulness in a minute also, but I filmed this one in Rondo Provincial Park, which some of you may have been to before. And what we're going to do is we're going to play this for 1 minute. You're going to listen. You can either watch the screen and follow the prompts on breathing, because we're just going to do a little breathing exercise to calm us all down, or you can close your eyes and just take your own deep breaths. But just pay attention to what you're hearing. If you're looking, pay attention if you're seeing anything as well. And then I'll ask you at the end if you heard or saw anything. So again, you can close your eyes if you want, but you don't have to. We'll see if this is loud enough. Can we hear? I don't know if we can hear it, Jackson. Seems very quiet.
I think that's going to be the one bugaboo because we don't have your computer.
I'm just going to see if I can get the mic to
Sure.
the speaker, wherever the speaker is.
It's in the front of the podium.
Okay, we'll try that again. I'm gonna have to do this for all the videos. It's best we figure it out now. This is a quick little breathing practice. Did anybody hear anything? Anything stand out? Any birds you recognized? Oh, the battery's running low on this computer.
Oh, geez.
We'll get going eventually. Keeps things interesting anyway.
No, there's a plug in here somewhere.
Hey, while we're waiting, you can look at the meme that I put up there. I love this quote, "The sound of birds stops the noise in my mind." That was by Carly Simon. A great songstress. How's that? That's good. Yep. So a bit about me. I'm from New Brunswick. I was raised in many different places, including Maine and Nova Scotia, and I've lived in England and BC, in Ontario a few times, but this is where I met my husband, so we did end up back in Ontario. I started birding about 17 years ago. If you see me in the field, don't judge me on that. I was working full time. I had a baby that went through surgeries and all kinds of things, and no community. So everything I learned on my own for quite a while. But I got very involved in working with different nature organizations when I did become a birder, and volunteering with lots of different people like the Toronto Ornithological Club. I was a part of the Bird Friendly Cities in Hamilton while I was here. I've worked for Nature Trust in New Brunswick doing volunteer work, and I love doing Christmas bird counts, which I have done also with Sheldon McGregor, who had me climbing up and down ravines, and I'm surprised I lived. But I just love those things. I became a birder because of that bird. It's not your usual spark bird. When people talk about spark birds, the bird that you're interested in birding, it's usually not a domestic bird. I was living in downtown Toronto at the time, and I had seen a group of people that were trying to catch this bird in a back alleyway at Queen and Bathurst. And they were American, and they said, "We have to go back across the border. Can you stay and catch this bird? Because it shouldn't be out here on its own." I knew nothing about birds at this point, but I agreed to stay and help the bird. I could not find the owner, and I decided to keep it. So I had to learn everything I could about canaries, which is a strange way to go about becoming a birder. But after I learned everything I could about canaries, that's banana bird, by the way, I decided I should start looking for wild birds. And I had an acquaintance who was into birding, and I decided to message him and see if he would take me birding. So he took me on a little outing to High Park in Toronto, and that was it. I was obsessed, and I was never going to stop birding after that. I had to go birding all the time. It was just so interesting to me. I didn't know why. I didn't know why I was obsessed with this new thing that I had found, but I knew I had to do it. And it wasn't until I ended up in intensive trauma therapy about 4 years ago that I realized why birding was so important to me. And the reason why it was so important to me is exactly that quote. It was the only time that my mind was quiet. At that point, I hadn't been diagnosed with ADHD yet, and I didn't realize the effect it was having on me, not knowing that diagnosis. I had no idea where these obsessions came from. It was all part of it, but this was a healthy obsession, so I'm totally okay with it. So at that time, I had told my therapist that there was no way I could meditate. There was no way I was going to do yoga. There's no way that I could practice grounding or mindfulness because of all the trauma that I'd had in my life. I just could not quiet my mind. And it was very frustrating to try to do any of these skills that they were trying to teach me. I just could not do it. And of course, birding came up every week in my therapy, and I was going 4 times a week because that was part of the course that I had to take at CAMH. So everybody knew that I was obsessed with birds. I found out after from one of my therapists that I indeed was practicing all those things that I thought I couldn't do. And I was doing that by birding. That's why I was doing it. And I didn't even realize, because I needed that quietness in my life. And I needed something where I could be present and something that I could actually concentrate on outside of my problems. When I'm birding, I always tell people, I'm not thinking about my past. I'm not thinking about my future. I'm just here. I'm just aware that I'm alive. I'm aware that I'm breathing, and that's all I need. So that is where I came to birds, why I am obsessed with birds. I started the project. It was actually something I had in mind to do for many years, but I wasn't ready yet. And I knew I didn't have the capability at that time because I didn't have a support system to listen to other people's stories and be able to take those on without internalizing them and having them harm me more. But once I got to a place in my therapy where I felt it was safe for me to talk to other people about their traumas, I wanted to start the project. In the beginning, the project was supposed to be a feature-length documentary, which it still is hopefully going to be. It's just impossible to find funding. So when I couldn't do that, I decided to just use my own phone and go out, film people, hear their stories, and share those with other people. And because it's so time consuming, I wanted something to do in the meantime on social media. So we started sharing tips. We started sharing stories by written interviews or by quotes. And we just started really connecting as a community, which has been amazing. Sometimes all someone needs is to find a connection with someone else to make them feel like there's hope. So I think it's really important for people to connect this way. And in the birding community and in my online community, I'd realized that many people were sending me private messages saying they didn't identify as a birder because of the people they had met in the birding community, and that was really hurtful. So I wanted to find a way to make it more open and accepting and safe for everyone to join in. And I think part of that is kind of talking about the definition of calling yourself a birder. I don't think you have to know anything about birds to be a birder. I don't think you have to learn to identify them. Do I do it? Yes. Do I love it? Yes. But I don't expect everyone to bird the same way. If someone watches birds, I think they're a birder. I think you can learn so much just by watching them without knowing anything else about them. I'm going to go to next. So through this project, I've been building a community of like-minded birders that like to bird kind of the way I do. Everyone does it slightly different, but we all have this certain way of just enjoying our time with birds without listing and chasing. I still list, and I do still chase sometimes because that's a dopamine rush for me, and also to see lifers, because who doesn't want to see a lifer? But I've also given myself the permission to not go if I'm not feeling up to it. I have a lot of health problems, and I was forcing myself to do things beyond what my body could handle, and even my mental health sometimes. So I wanted to build a community of other people who could bird this way without feeling that fear of missing out when you weren't going to see a bird that your friends were seeing, and it was actually making my mental health worse. When I moved back to Toronto, it was a very different birding community than on the East Coast where I'd been living. And it was super competitive. And I really got into the listing and chasing for a couple of years, and then realized how much it was actually harming my mental health when I was missing something that other people I knew were seeing. And at that time, I made the conscious decision to go back to why I started birding in the first place. And that was just purely for the love of birds and the fact that I enjoyed being around them and watching them and learning about their behavior and just feeling calm in my mind. So one way that I build the community, like I said, was by quotes that people send me that they want to share about how birding helps them, the written interviews that I do for people that I can't get to film, and the short documentaries. And I think that sharing with each other helps us all stay connected. So I know we've talked about Bob Bell already tonight, and I'm sure many of you know Bob. He's in the Sioux tonight doing his presentation on Lyme. But Bob was one of the first people to reach out to me that wanted to share his story when I was living here in Hamilton, and he kind of let me, try out all the things I wanted to do on him. I ended up re-editing this video recently, so if you have seen it before, it's a bit different. I've been working with a wildlife documentarian that was actually my birding mentor in New Brunswick. And he's been assisting me and really teaching me and taking me under his wing and helping me a lot with these videos. So I redid his video because I think his story is really important and it was worth making it even better. So now we're going to watch Bob's story. I don't know if I might need to do this again. Let's see. If we can't hear, I'll restart it, but I'm just seeing where this is the volume on here.
My name is Bob Bell. I was born and raised in Northern Ontario. My father was a high school science teacher who instilled in me the love of nature of all types. Summers were spent at a family cottage in the Algoma district, where I collected rocks and minerals, butterflies and moths, and spent the night stargazing with my telescope. Not surprisingly then, I pursued a career as a mineral exploration geologist. I worked across Canada as well as in many diverse terrains, including the outback of Australia, the Amazon of Brazil, the high Andes of Peru and Ecuador, the barren lands of Greenland, and the wilderness of Namibia. Somewhere in these travels, I apparently encountered a tick which left me with Lyme disease, with mysterious symptoms first appearing in the fall of 2013. My health, or lack thereof, forced me into premature retirement in the fall of 2015, after I had to concede I was not able to fulfill my duties as a CEO of a Toronto Stock Exchange-listed mineral exploration company. Upon retirement, I moved to Ancaster, where I bought a home surrounded by forest adjacent to the Dundas Valley Conservation Area. It took over a year to get a diagnosis of Lyme disease, and that required going to the US. The Canadian medical system was so skeptical of Lyme and seemingly unconcerned about what was causing my symptoms if they didn't check the boxes correctly. For example, I developed a number of neurological symptoms, including numbness, burning, and pins and needles sensation in my hands and feet, a strong tremor in my hands, and a frequent loss of balance while walking, which required me to use a cane. After undergoing various neurological tests, including an MRI, the neurologist told me with a smirk on his face, "I'm sorry to say you don't have a neurological disease." Yet, he had no interest in understanding why I exhibited such symptoms. In fact, I have most of the symptoms of multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's. Lyme is highly curable if treated immediately, but because it took so long, I now live with chronic Lyme. Other symptoms that I have as a result of this are migratory muscle pains, joint pains, overwhelming fatigue, roaring tinnitus in my ears, emotional instability such as societal anxiety, heart palpitations, and brain fog. My symptoms, although always present, have some seasonal cyclicity in their intensity. They are often worse in the fall and winter and improve a bit in spring and summer, which fits very well with my favorite time of year for birding, spring migration. Given my love of nature, I've always had bird feeders and had a reasonable knowledge of birds. As soon as I moved into my retirement home, I put up a set of feeders and was enthralled by the numerous species I visited frequently, including a Carolina wren, which I'd never seen before. I began to fill my days with researching the birds in my area. While sitting at my desk, which has a view of the backyard feeders, I noticed that when I was doing this, my constant aches and pains seemed to subside, or at least take a back seat in my preoccupied mind. People talk about a spark bird that hooked them on birding. One might argue that the Carolina wren was mine, as it did spark my interest in learning more. But the true spark for me was my participation in a half-day birding outing led by members of the Hamilton Naturalist Club. During that trip, I made new friends, learned a lot, and got tips on cameras and binoculars. And with that, I was hooked. I became obsessive compulsive about birding, learning all the local trails and hotspots, signing up for various listserv bird alerts, and taking a number of online and in-person courses. All of this was, of course, limited by my energy levels and physical abilities. But most importantly, the more immersed I was in birding, the less I was aware of my aches and pains. It is not that they were gone, but my mind was redirected. I was so excited about my new passion that I began to give public slideshows on birding, wanting to share my experiences. One older participant emailed me after one talk and told me she'd had a lifetime desire to see a bluebird but had mobility issues. I happened to know of a location where you could simply drive a farm road, pull over by a nesting box just inside a farm fence, and watch the bluebird parents coming back and forth with food for their youngsters. She acted on this and sent me a follow-up thank you email that brought tears to my eyes, so grateful that I could benefit from it. So how does this obsession of mine, being a bird, help my health? In a nutshell, it provides me with fresh air, exercise, mental calming, a new hobby I'm passionate about, the impetus to learn new things, and camaraderie with new friends. I believe that pushing your body to its limits, no matter what those limits might be, is beneficial. It is not uncommon for me to walk 5 to 10 kilometers in a day when I'm birding, a far cry from just a few years ago when walking a few hundred meters with the aid of a cane was exhausting. Walking this far does not feel like hard work. I am simply pursuing my passion in a dreamlike trance. The thrill of spotting a rare bird or a lifer gets the adrenaline flowing. I've blown many a photograph because I was literally trembling with excitement. I am not good at curbing my enthusiasm if the bird is a warbler, which are my favorites. Birding satisfies my collecting obsession, as I now strive to collect birds by seeing and photographing every species possible. In late 2019, a friend of mine organized and launched an Ontario-wide challenge for 2020 called 5MR, the MR standing for mile radius. The challenge is for a birder to find as many species as possible within a 5-mile radius circle centered on his or her home. For me personally, it has been an eye-opening exercise, having discovered a diverse number of excellent bird habitats that I did not know existed so close to home. I am so lucky to have my favorite birding spots, such as here in the Dundas Valley, within minutes of home. Talking about the pandemic makes me think of Lyme again. Climate change is probably a key driver in the rapid expansion of Lyme disease, allowing ticks to expand their range northwards and forcing birds that inadvertently carry and spread ticks to modify and adapt their breeding ranges as well. Many of my birding friends are terrified of contracting Lyme. Just remember that not every bug bite is a tick bite, and not every tick is a black-legged tick, and that not every black-legged tick is carrying Lyme. Lyme totally changed my life. It forced me to retire from an exciting, challenging, well-paying job that I loved. Lyme is what indirectly led me to birding, and while I wouldn't wish Lyme on anyone, I am grateful to have ended up as a happy birder, even with my physical limitations, or more to the limitations. Birding saved my life. It brings me excitement, fun, new challenges, peace of mind, satisfaction, and most importantly, it takes my mind off my body. Birding has become so therapeutic for me that I wrote a book about it. It is titled Out of the Limelight and Into the Sunlight, Birding as Therapy for the Chronically Ill. Life is a journey, and it is incumbent on us to make the best of it. I hope my journey might inspire some folks suffering with a chronic illness to get out of the limelight and into the sunlight, where the singing birds will warm your heart and lift your spirit.
I'm in front of it and I could barely hear it, so I don't know how that was for you all, but next one, I'm going to make sure closed captioning is turned on. Hopefully that works. Sorry, it makes me go out after the video.
The 43 people who are watching on Zoom said that they could hear it just fine as well.
Yeah, it's just quiet here, I think. All right, I'm no scientist, so the science part is short. Just trust me that it is scientific. Spending time in nature helps generate positive emotions like joy and calmness. And nature can enhance our working memory, help us focus and relieve stress by reducing cortisol, a stress hormone in our bodies. Within several minutes of being in nature, we boost our endorphin levels, serotonin levels, and dopamine production, which are chemicals in our brain that promotes happiness, satisfaction, and motivation. It lowers blood pressure, decreases pain, improves our mental outlook, and gives nutrients like oxygen and vitamin D. People with mental and physical pain can see a huge difference in their mind and bodies after spending time in nature on a regular basis. It has been found to have a profound effect on those living with anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, high blood pressure, and more. I can attest to all of those things except for high blood pressure, because right now mine's low apparently. But for myself with my autoimmune, I have fibromyalgia as well. I do get a lot of pain in my body. There's days where I can barely get out of bed, but I know if I can drag myself out of bed to a forest or the lake, when I was on the East Coast, the ocean, I know that I can actually hike and do things that I didn't think I could do until I get home, and then I'm done for like 24 hours usually, but I really don't notice the pain when I'm doing this. And it's really quite incredible what it does for you. I don't know if anybody else can agree that they've found any of these things to help them with their physical health as well. So how does birding help us? As I mentioned before, it was a way for me to find grounding, a way for me to meditate that wasn't the typical way that people would suggest meditating to you with your legs crossed on the floor, being quiet, something I couldn't do. Emotional regulation was a huge one. I get a lot of intense emotions with a lot of my health problems. And anytime when I was feeling a little bit out of control, or if I needed to make a big decision that was giving me anxiety, I knew I could go to the forest or the lake or wherever it is I wanted to watch birds, and I would come home in a much clearer frame of mind to make those decisions, or just to regulate my emotions again when I would come home. And it certainly is a way to practice mindfulness for me. Like I said before, it's the only time my brain is quiet. It's the only time that I am really focusing on the present. I still haven't figured out how to do that outside of birding. It's something that takes a lot of practice. So if you haven't practiced it in birding, don't be surprised if it takes you some time as well to be able to do it in nature. And that's okay. Distress tolerance is another one. So birding can decrease negative thoughts and emotions by practicing mindfulness. It helps you to focus on the present moment as you would watch or listen for the birds around you. A strategy used in DBT, or dialectical behavior therapy. This is a therapy that they use for trauma patients a lot of the time. Birding can give you a sense of belonging and community. It can build your strength and your self-esteem too. Using your senses such as touch, smell, sight, or hearing can help increase your distress tolerance through self-soothing. This can help you reduce stress enough to be able to cope more effectively. I say use your 5 senses, but use your, I don't know if you want to taste a lot of things when you're out, unless you know a lot about foraging. So practice on like maybe sight, smell. I do like always try to come up with like 4 or 5 things in each of my senses that I can find in nature. It helps me to really ground. I'm moving 2 screens at the same time, so. So this year, while many people in Ontario and friends of mine were announcing their big years, I announced I was doing a mindful birding year. So you can guess who saw the most birds probably, but I did, only with a few chases, I still managed to see 247 birds last year, being mindful. And the reason why I think that I still managed to see that many birds is because I was being more patient, and I was sitting in a place longer than I would have normally. I wasn't getting in the car and driving from bird to bird. Instead, I was waiting to see what would come to me. And I think that's why I still saw a lot of things, because if I had moved on really quickly, I would have missed a lot of birds. Well, so what is mindful birding? It's something different to a lot of different people. There's really no right or wrong way to do mindful birding, but the objective is to go somewhere and just be present, pay attention, listen to your breathing, be still, become a part of nature. Because when you're a part of nature, everything will come to you. And even when you're walking or rushing or talking with something else, you're kind of scaring things away a little bit. So if you can find a place to just sit down, I call it rooted birding myself. A lot of people call it a sit spot. So when you're rooted in one place, like a tree, everything around you will not notice you anymore. And when you become that quiet and that part of nature, that is when the magic happens, in my opinion. I have watched the coolest bird behaviors while doing mindful birding, things that I never would have known if I was not being still. So mindful birding can help you increase your ID skills. So even though I say it's not an objective to ID the bird, just by watching and spending a lot of time with a bird, you're going to learn a lot more about that bird. It increases your knowledge of bird behavior. It teaches us to be present, and it teaches us patience. I don't know who else needs to learn patience, but I certainly need to learn patience. I actually started practicing at the cemetery across from the castle. And I would be like, okay, I'm going to sit here for 5 minutes. I'm not allowed to leave this bench for 5 minutes. That's how little my patience was. I worked myself up to a half an hour, and then I have to walk a little bit. I do like to include a little bit of hiking, but I'll find a new spot and watch from there as well. And sometimes you're in such a good spot with so many birds, it's easier to stay put for a really long time. So these are my tips for mindful birding that I put together based on how I do it. So I find a place where you can sit and connect to nature. You sit quietly and observe sounds and scents around you. What can you feel around you? Wait for a bird to watch and describe it in your head, every little thing that you notice. Let go of any expectations you may have about the experience and practice. It's something we like to call a beginner's mind. So you want to come at this like a child learning about something for the first time. That makes it so exciting no matter what you're looking at. I could be looking at the most common birds and really enjoy them now. I love watching just the doves in my backyard. Like I'll just sit there and laugh at them all day. They're just always doing something funny. So a lot of people go, it's a dove. I don't believe that. I don't like to bird that way. It's never just a whatever. Whatever you're looking at, it's fine. And on some days, all I have to look at is a dove, especially if I can't leave my house. So I will take what I can get. This is a quote actually from someone from Hamilton that wrote in to the community and wanted to share a quote. Her name is Jenny. I don't think she's here. I saw her. It says, when I have been in excruciating pain, when I have been stressed out and anxious, birding has saved me. It forces you to slow down, to focus, and to exist in the outdoors and shut everything else out of it. It's meditation and it is medicine. I love that line that it is medicine because I also say the same thing. There is a huge lack of mental health care, and even now we're having a huge lack of physical care happening in Ontario and Canada. And for me, this was my free way to get help before I could get actual help. If this is all I had, it was something. So sometimes we have to advocate for ourselves and take our health into our own hands. And birding was a way of me doing that. I wanted to share a couple of my favorite mindful birding experiences that I'll still get excited. Doesn't matter how many times I see these, but I'm going to go ahead and show you. So I'll let you watch it first, then we'll talk about it. Graphic warning. No cheaters from my Instagram account, but did anybody see what was happening there before I explain it? Do you notice anything? I'm going to show it to you again. So I was coming out of a place called Lynn Shores. I had been hiking there with my friend for the day, and he loves taking pictures too. So do I, but I'm terrible at it. But he had walked off for a second to take a picture of something. And as we all know, the best birding usually happens in the parking lot. So I was in the parking lot getting ready to leave. After you hike all day and see nothing, everything's in the parking lot. And I noticed the crow up on the wire, and normally, whatever, it's a crow, and people are like, oh, it's a crow. I love crows, they're super smart. So I thought, let's just start taking a video of this crow, because I had never seen a crow with a snake before. And I thought that was really cool that he was like up there ripping the snake apart. And even though I don't like snakes, I thought that was interesting. So I noticed at the end, if I just put it here again, and I did sense, I don't know if anybody follows, I think her name is Kaylee Swift. That might be her name. She's a Corvid researcher. She's very well known. I sent her this video because I believe that I'm the first person that ever recorded a crow tying a bow with a snake before it flew off. It is an actual bow. It doesn't look like a bow. It's actually, he actually threaded it through. So I'm going to go back and show you again. She said she'd never seen such a thing. So I feel like I'm the first person. I don't know. I'll just show you this part again so you can see. Pull it through. Make it easier to carry. I'm assuming. Flies off. You can see the bow when he turns. If I hadn't stopped to look at just a crow, I wouldn't have seen that. And I think that this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen, to be honest. So I just love this video. The next one is a little bit more of a common behavior that some of you may have seen before. It was between two belted kingfishers. And this one was taken at Sam Smith Park in Toronto, which was my local for quite a while. And the male had grabbed a fish, which seemed like it was already dead, to be honest, by the time it went up to the tree, but it started to like just bang the fish on a tree, which I thought that would be to kill it, but I think it was already dead. I think it's just a way of showing the female that, hey, look at me, I can find you food. So you should like me. And then it passes it off. So I'll show you that one. I don't know if you can hear all the camera clicks in the background, but there was a yellow-crowned night heron that everybody was taking pictures of while I was just taking a video about the kingfishers. Because I was like, look over there, look what they're doing. And I just thought that was so fun. And then she proceeded to hold that fish for a good 5 minutes. And I don't know what happened after that because I think I left, but I was like, what is she doing with it? Didn't eat it. He was just holding the trophy of her future husband, I guess. So this is something also I think I created. I don't know. I call it mindful night birding. I love doing this. Okay, this makes me excited. So sometimes your day gets away with you or you don't have a chance to go out and you come home, especially in the winter when the sun's already gone at 5 and you're like, well, I guess I'm not birding today. Guess what? You can. So I love to do this. This is something that's especially good during spring and fall migration, but you can also do it at other times of the year. You could go and listen for woodcocks, like right now. You could listen for owls. There's all kinds of birds that make noise at night. So, but the one that I'm going to show you is actually from fall migration. Yes, fall migration this last fall. And I turned on my sound ID from the Merlin app. So I'm just showing you here the kind of chip calls that it was capturing as they were, or the flight calls they were capturing as they flew over. So this was after dark. I think generally I was starting to record around 9 o'clock at night, but from about 8 o'clock onwards, I think you can hear birds flying over. I have a really good flight path over my house, I realized. So I put that app on. I don't know if all of you use Merlin. It's not 100%, so it will throw some weird things in there that I didn't believe. But most of them were believable because I knew those things were moving around and I could tell when I was birding which birds were coming and going by by seeing what was flying over at night. So I would look at this and I say, oh, it's caught chipping sparrow, white-throated sparrow, song sparrow, white-crowned sparrow, Savannah sparrows. It was a good sparrow night. And I knew that the next day I would either see less of those around when I was birding or more of those around when I was birding, depending. And then I just put the little capture there of the little notes that it was picking up. So that's one way you can mindful night bird. You can just listen if you're way better than me at listening to flight calls. I'm just not good at them. And this was a good way for me to learn them, is put this app on. And then I would try to guess them before I would look at the app to see what it was. This one, it's going to start autoplaying. Hopefully you can see as well. This is the other way I like to do mindful night birding. So there's something we call moon migration. It's especially good when there's a full moon or a bright moon. But during migration time, you can actually see birds with your binoculars or your scope flying past the moon. Obviously, they're not right in front of the moon, but they're flying past the light, so you can see them. You can't identify these ones. I tried. It's impossible. They're just little black specks. So I'm going to show each of these to you a couple times so you can see them, because you have to kind of find where it is before you see it, because they can be small little blips. I did also slow them down. So for this, I set up my video camera on my regular camera. It's nothing special. It's just a SX50 Canon point and shoot. Put it on a tripod, put it towards the moon, film for like a couple hours while I'm out there watching. And then I come in and I put it on my computer and I slow it down and watch for anything where I see a bird flying across so I can save the video. So this one is hard to see on here. Do you see it at the top? Okay. Oh, look, I can. I'll do that one more time. Is that the top? There. Okay. Very quick. This one, again, at the top, flying across. That one I slowed down quite a bit. Anybody have an idea on that one? Might have been rare. I don't know. Just for fun, I sent it to one of my super serious ornithologist friends, and she was like, no. Had to try. This one goes right across the middle here. Gotta move that. Yeah, there's your moon migration. So like I said, you can catch some stuff with your scope or your binoculars. It's a little tricky, but the best way I find to do it is just to set up something to record and then go watch them on your computer. And that's hours of mindful birding, going through this, all of this footage that you take. The next little bit I just wanted to touch on was about mental health and conservation. And I don't know how many of you in here volunteer doing some bird things. Could be for the club, it could be Christmas bird counts, could be owl surveys, whatever. There's some volunteers in here. Yes, cool. So volunteering is scientifically proven to improve our cognitive health, promote brain activity, reduce stress, anxiety, and depression symptoms. I highly recommend getting involved in nature and conservation work for these reasons, but also because of the difference that we can all make getting involved in citizen science. On the flip side, seeing constantly bad news, especially when you're doing things like bird-friendly cities with window collisions, having bad experiences while volunteering with a person or an organization can start to have the opposite effect on you. So when you feel like you need to take a break, give yourself permission to take one. It's important. You can always come back fighting later, is what I always say. I find people that do volunteer end up volunteering a lot, and it can be exhausting. So I just want to encourage people to get involved in conservation and volunteering, but to also take care of yourself first. So the next video I'm going to show you is about one of those people. I'm going to try to put on closed captioning this time. There might be, it comes up with its own, so it might say some words wrong. So just try to figure it out. But the next story is about Nikki Gillette. She's from Halifax, Nova Scotia. I was out filming there in November. And she is one of the lead volunteers of Protect Heartland Point. She's going to explain more about that here. So she's heavily involved in conservation and trying to preserve green spaces, because without green spaces, we can't really take care of ourselves at all. So we need that connection to nature as humans. So I'm going to show you her story. Just give me a second to set the closed captioning this time. Oops, that's not what I wanted. I went the wrong way. Why is it still playing now? My name is Nikki Gillette, and I'm originally from Ontario, but now I live in Halifax, Nova Scotia. My pronouns are she, her. I work in the film industry as a set dresser, and I also work for the Marine Animal Response Society on the east coast of Canada. The last 10 or so years of my time living in Ontario was spent in Toronto, and it just became overwhelming for me. The noise, the traffic, the collective energy just really wasn't doing good things for my mental health. And anytime I tried to leave the city and escape to nature, that alone felt like a challenge. Everything was so far away and there was so much traffic, and I couldn't always get the time off to make that work. So I decided to leave, and after about a year of planning, I moved to Halifax. I was feeling very pulled to the ocean, and I love the accessibility to nature here. There's so many wild green spaces and beaches that you can escape to and have time outside without making it a whole weekend trip. I started birding when my partner's mom came to visit us from Ontario. We actually went on a birding trip to Briar Island with a small group, and I was amazed at how easy it was. I think I had built up birding in my mind as something that required a lot of skill or planning or energy, and really anyone can do it, which is why it's so appealing. My favorite place to bird in Nova Scotia is called Heartland Point. It's the headland of Eastern Passage right on the ocean, and it's only about 25 minutes from the city, which makes it super accessible and quick to get to. It's the #1 birding location in Nova Scotia and number 10 in all of Canada, with over 300 species identified here. I'm part of a grassroots group called Protect Heartland Point, which aims to protect the area from a warship systems testing facility, which we believe will damage and develop an incredibly biodiverse, sensitive habitat and ecosystem, which is used by hundreds of thousands of local and migratory birds each year. It feels easy and very important to fight for a piece of land that I know is so valuable to so many animals and birds. But at the same time, it's also incredibly draining and sad to even think that we have to put so much energy into protecting something that so obviously deserves protection. Since I started birding, I think it has done really great things for my mental health. It's something that when you're doing it, you can't be doing other things. So if I'm out birding for the day or for a couple hours, I can't be checking my phone or tidying the house up. It's completely disconnected from everything else, which I think is very important, and that's why there's a meditative aspect to it. I think anything that connects you with nature in the way that birding does is important and is beautiful. To go outside for however long, or even from your window or your house, and look at birds and try and identify them and try and learn about them, and just to watch them and see how they live brings you closer to nature, and we are all nature. Our society rewards busyness, keeping busy with your job, working hard, constantly upkeeping your house, being seen, events, all of these different things. And I think there's a shift, and the pendulum is swinging back towards mental health and prioritizing self and what we need to feel okay and happy and fulfilled in life, which is not money and belongings, it's connection. I know that when I go for periods of time without going outside and spending time in nature,
spending time in the quiet, disconnecting from social media and phones and TV and all the other things, I feel so much calmer, so much less anxious, and it's really important. And I love that birding is sort of a prompt and a reminder to myself to get outside and to do that. Access to nature and to green spaces are incredibly important. And there are health studies done that show the benefits of people who have access to those things. That's part of why I'm fighting to protect Heartland Point, because it's so close to the city and because I know for myself how it has helped with my mental health. And I know others who feel the same way that I do. I love the calmness that birding brings, but I also love the excitement of it. When you find out there's a rare bird in the area and you're able to go and see it and see this bird, this being that you've never seen before in your life, it's really exciting. And I've had quite a few lifers at Heartland Point. I think my favorite birding memory was this past summer. My partner and I were at a cottage in the woods and we took the kayak out on the lake at sunset, and a loon and her baby were swimming around us in the water. And we were just sort of sitting there, not paddling, and she was calling over and over, and it was so loud and beautiful and mesmerizing. And then her baby would try to imitate the call, but it just sounded like a tiny little wheeze, and it was magical. I was trying to think of a funny birding moment, and a memory came to mind of a time where there was a king eider, a female spotted in a specific area, which I went to every day for 5 days in a row. She was in a huge group of common eiders, so she was really hard to spot because they weren't very close to the shore. So one day when I went down there, I sat on this little dock that was kind of hidden, and there were 2 eiders in front of me. And I was sort of talking to them and thinking about them, and I took a few photos, and I looked for the king eider, couldn't find her. Then I went home and looked at my photos, and the 2 eiders that were swimming right in front of me that entire time, one of them was the king eider that I had been looking for. So I saw her and I didn't even realize it. Climate change, and specifically in my case, development, threaten the places that I love to bird in Nova Scotia. It's not good for my mental health. It's something I spend so much time and energy focusing on when, of course, there are so many other things I'd rather be doing. I feel like there's a responsibility if you have the time and the resources to act on something like this. But at the same time, you want to get to a place where you can just enjoy life and enjoy nature and not worry about it being threatened, and sit back and say, hey, let's come together and prioritize and protect what's important.
Closed captioning really loved eider, in case you didn't notice. That's some really good ones in there. Fighters, combinators, I don't know what that is. But hopefully you understood what was happening. All right, so we're kind of at the end. I just wanted to share a little bit about my goals for the project. I'm looking to reach more people to share their stories, particularly through filming, because that's what I really love to do. To have the operation costs covered. And with that said, in the past week, I have partnered with Urban Nature Store, who does have several stores close to here. They've offered to cover just my operating costs for me for the next year, which is amazing. So that covers not any of the work I'm doing, but it does cover the use of my programs and website, which is amazing. So I'm very grateful to them for that. And I think they're going to be carrying Bob's book too. So they're great people to support because they're really supporting the community as well. I want to grow the community so that I'm eligible for grants and sponsorships, because right now I'm just a nobody filmmaker who just decided I wanted to make films and that I would do it even if people said I couldn't. So, you know, having a crew would make these way better than what I did. But, and then eventually, like I said, it's to make a feature length documentary. So building the community is a big part of that, because many of the producers I talked to said, build your community. And once you have people following you, then let's talk again. How can you help? You can participate in the project. You can send me quotes. If you would just like to have a little graphic made with a quote that you want to share about how birding helps you. You can be a part of the filming if you would like to do a short documentary. You could also do written interviews. Another way to help is to donate. The link is on the website. I'm not a nonprofit because there's a lot of red tape with that right now for me, but I am looking to cover some more travel because there's so many people that have reached out that want to share their stories, and they're really important stories, and I can't get to them. So I myself am on a long-term disability because of all my health issues, and obviously trying to live on disability is very difficult. So adding traveling into that is pretty much near impossible. So I'm looking for donations towards the travel particularly. I have started a Patreon page as well. It's brand new, so there's nothing up there yet. It just started last week, but you can follow me on Patreon for a low cost per month. That helps, I think, starting at $5 a month. And I will be sharing some extra project stuff on there that I don't share on other social media. So obviously a way to help without money is just to follow the project online, share it, and help me spread the word. My website is birderbraindoc.com. I have a Facebook, a Twitter, and an Instagram. I use Twitter the least amount, but and Instagram probably the most. But you can find me on all those places. And I do have some business cards here if anybody wants one. You can come get one so you remember. And look at that Cape May. That was at my new friend next to Rondo. He has a brook outside of his house that he built with a blind where he takes professional photos. I do not, but I even managed to get that without being a good photographer. So it's a good spot. And if anybody ever wants to come birding around that area, just message me through my page. I'm happy to show people around. I love doing that. I am leading some walks coming up with OFO as well around Rondo. So you can check those out on their website. And we're at the end. So if anybody has any comments or questions. Yes.
Reconnect with what got me started in this in the first place. And I may not be the typical story, but I didn't really start actively birding until I was 30. And we're talking about mindfulness. And I found that when I was doing it, just the thing that drew me to it and kept me doing it was that my mind was going outward rather than inward.
Yes.
And in summary, somebody said this to me a long time ago, and it wasn't about birding. So I'm gonna have to reformat it, but the number of hours you spend doing something pleasurable is not subtracted from the total hours you have on this earth. And that's actually what I think the activity is done for me. It's kind of like pause from all the stuff that we spend so much of our life talking.
Yep.
But I actually, that part of my life, I don't think has been subtracted.
I love that. I love that it made you realize that too. I love that. One of the other factors in dialectical behavior therapy is actually increasing pleasurable activity, which you just said that, pleasurable activity. And when they showed me this giant list of 300 pleasurable activities, I just basically put a box and wrote birding. There we go. That's all I need. But there's lots of different things obviously that you can do. And the great thing about therapy for me was that I was given permission, not that I needed permission, but when you go through a lot of trauma, it's very hard to put yourself first, and it's very hard to allow yourself to give yourself that self-care that you need, and just to allow yourself to do anything without feeling guilty. Because I just felt guilty every time I left the house with my husband and my son at home. They weren't making me feel that way. I just automatically felt like if I'm doing something that feels good for me, it must be wrong. That's just what I was taught. So this is a great way to give yourself permission to go out as much as you can, because it's actually going to make you a better person when you're at home. And I think that's, you know, and I could explain it to my husband that way too. Like, he's like, maybe you should go birding. Like, if I'm in a bad mood, like, he's just like, go, you can go, it's fine. But it just, you know, gives you permission to take care of yourself in a different way, I think. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
In the chat,
Yeah.
on Zoom,
Mhm.
Dennis shared a story that I'll just share with everyone really quickly. So we saw something new to us this weekend with Canada geese. At first, we thought two were fighting, but then figured perhaps one was trying to mate with the other. What was strange is that one was trying to get away and would completely dive under the water, reappearing a few meters away, only to be attacked again by the other goose. It repeatedly submerged under the water as it tried to get away from the attacker. I didn't know they had that ability. Less of a comment, less of a question, more of a comment, but I think it has to do with someone standing and observing and witnessing that behavior, forcing them to make that statement. Perhaps there's anyone in the room who might have witnessed that before or could maybe shed some light on what was happening. Any thoughts? Yeah. Mallards do that? Very interesting.
So if you said that's just a goose and kept walking, you wouldn't have seen those behaviors.
Yeah.
That's actually last winter in Hamilton, I think, was the first time I saw geese doing like barrel rolls. They were like completely flipping over underwater, and I never really watched, like I said, I never stopped to watch something that I saw all the time. I would be on to find something else, like where's a different bird that would be more interesting. But I sat down, and I make a habit of sitting down in front of these common birds at the waterfront or wherever I am, and just staying and watching what they're doing. And it was really quite hilarious. Like, I was laughing so much the whole time because it just looks so funny watching them go topple over under the water. Yeah.
Yeah, how long does it take you from a production standpoint to film, let's say, Bob's segment? What are the hours that go into that production?
Generally, I spend, well, however long the person will spend with me, like the longer they spend with me, the better, because we end up chatting about everything and anything usually. I feel like a little bit of a therapist sometimes when I'm out with people, but I generally between like 4 and 5 hours of filming. So I get a lot of footage that I can cut in. And then I usually stay for another couple hours after I allow the person to leave so that they can get about their day. And I do like the cutaway shots, try to shoot some birds that we saw on site and things like that. Because it's hard to stop and do all the waiting around for a bird to come when you're trying to film the person, because they would have to be with you like for hours to do that. So I try to do that after they leave.
And then how about editing?
Oh, editing, the bane of my existence. Editing can take me usually about a week if I'm working on it every day, all day. And the big part of editing that pushes me into sometimes 2 and 3 weeks is the rendering and re-rendering and re-rendering of the footage when I find a small error that I have to go in and change, and it's very annoying, but I don't like to put out things with loads of errors in it. So, and when I started editing with my old birding mentor, Roger, he had a lot to say. So he'd be like, you know what, this film is really great on its own, just the way it is. And for people that aren't like documentary directors, they probably would look at this and think it looks great. But to me, So here's like 15 changes you could make, and they're just the tiniest things, but they do like add up and make such a big difference so I've just learned so much from him in editing. I'm getting better now. Every time I send him a new video, because he's doing this free of charge, which is amazing that he's willing to help me and watch these over and over and over again, because it can get annoying to hear the same thing over and over again, millions of times. But I'm like, hopefully this time there's like less changes. So he'll come back and be like, actually, yeah, this time there's only 6. That's way better than before. So we're getting there. It can take quite a bit of time. It just depends on the software. There's always issues with software and all kinds of things happening.
About the audio part, how do you get them to tell their stories?
So the audio is tricky. I knew that I didn't have the capability to do the films the way I'd originally envisioned them, which was to do a walk and talk with people, like interview them out in nature, which would be almost impossible to do that kind of audio without a sound crew, which I cannot afford. So I had to kind of do a workaround, and I just bounced some ideas off my husband and what I thought would work, because he actually works in film stop motion animation. So he has a bit of idea about sound stuff. So I came up with the idea of having them film or like record their own audio from their phone with a bunch of tips. Like, I'm not quite there yet with it. Every time I film someone else, I learn something new to say. I'm like, okay, this time, like try to cover your mic with something and make sure you're not too close. Watch for the like sounds, because that was happening a little bit. The pop sounds happen a lot. Make sure in a quiet space, do it in short little pieces, because if you make a mistake, you don't want to go back and record 8 minutes of your audio. So we do them in like little 20-30 second clips. So every time we do it, we're learning a little bit more. So far, I've been very lucky with the people who have sent in their scripts and their audios. They've been amazing. So I haven't had to do a whole lot. There is some audio stuff I do have to fix here and there as best I can in post, but that could take time.
You didn't have to tell them what to say or prompt questions?
No, what I have questions. I do have questions. Some people are happy to just talk and they know what they want to say. Most people, I send them the questions anyway, because I'm like, here's some tips of things that might start getting your creative juices flowing and help you decide what you want to say. And I do have a friend of mine, I think she's mentioned on there, Dacha, who works in film and has written novels, and she's a writer, and she will go over the scripts for me. So we have them write a script. They can use the questions or not use the questions. We read it over. Sometimes we don't need to make any changes. Actually, most of the time we really haven't made a lot of a change. And sometimes we just move some things around. So I'll just move the audio around that wasn't in order of how they did it, but it works a little bit better. We've just been super lucky with the people that I've filmed so far. I think we've done 6 so far. I say me, I've done 6 so far. And I've been so impressed with what they've had to say. And I've just been super lucky that they've been great storytellers and just, willing to be open and share with everybody. I've had a lot of people drop out. That is a big problem. They want to film and then last second they don't feel comfortable sharing their story. And I have to be okay with that, because it's very personal when you're sharing about your mental health. I like showing Nikki's as and some of the ones I don't show, they're a little bit more intense, but I like showing Nikki's because it gives people an idea how you can share about mental health without actually sharing anything personal about yourself per se.
I think my last question would have to do with the healthcare profession itself. So you said speaking with a therapist, how do you find the healthcare community handles questions about, let's say, climate anxiety or this topic? Is it welcoming, or is there are there lots of resources out there? Do you have any comments on that?
I wouldn't say we have lots of resources. I think we're so underfunded that it's really difficult to get help. Everyone on my care team, and I probably came across 10 to 15 different psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers, and therapists in my therapy over 3 years. And they were all very much on the same page with me and very open and very encouraging of being in nature. I know that Canada approved a park prescription But the issue is when I asked my doctor for it, she had no idea what it was or how to find it, and nothing ever came of it. So luckily I had a very kind birding friend from Toronto who shipped me a park pass while I was away last November filming. And I came home to that. I was super excited. So sometimes you have to rely on the kindness of others. It's very painful living 15 minutes from Rondo and not being able to afford to go in because it's $18 every time. So yeah.
You realize that actually take partial pass out.
Yes, but it does not work with birding hours. Because like, for instance, in May, I am gone every morning at 5 a.m. and I don't want to come back before the library closes at 4 or 5. So the sun goes down at 8:30. So I literally do the entire day. So I do know about the pass, but you can only also take it out for 1 day. So that's the other issue. I was talking to someone from Birds Canada about that because they were asking me about something for Toronto Bird Celebration. And she had mentioned that. And I said, well, the issue is with the park passes. It works great for families that want to take their kids out or someone who just wants to take an afternoon in the park. But you have to pick it up and return it the same day. So it doesn't work with pretty obsessive, serious birders that.
There's
Yeah.
actually going to be a lecture hosted by Royal Botanical Gardens this Thursday. It's the 9th biennial Patrick Colgan Memorial Lecture, and the special guest is Dr. Melissa Lem, director of and founder of Park Prescriptions for the BC
Yes.
Park Foundation, and Dr. Miles Sargent. So it's going to be a whole talk. It's called Prescribing Nature. What's the science behind park prescriptions? So
Yes, she was talking about this person, because I think they're also presenting at Toronto Bird Celebration.
Cool.
So again, I just told her like the issues around it are the pickup and drop off for many birders, but also the other issue is that doctors don't know anything about it. So how are you supposed to get it? It's a great idea, and I hope that it works out, but it's been it's been kind of released, I think about 2 years ago. And if doctors still don't know about it, I don't know what their plan is there, but I gave some feedback anyway, so.
Well, with 5 minutes to 9, we'll keep the floor for any final questions. On behalf of the Hamilton National Special University, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone.